The rain came down hard that November morning in London. Crowds pressed against the barricades outside Buckingham Palace, umbrellas bumping into each other. Everyone wanted a glimpse. Today was different. Today the Queen herself would pass through these gates. Among the sea of faces stood an elderly woman. Her name was Margaret. She was 83 years old. Her coat was thin. Her hands shook as she gripped the cold metal barrier. She had been standing there for 3 hours. Margaret had come alone. Her husband died 2 years ago. Her son lived in Australia. She had no one left in London. But she had a reason to be here. A reason that made her heart pound despite the cold. 59 years ago, her father had served the royal family. He was a driver. He had driven the Queen's mother during the war. Margaret still kept his medal in a small box at home. She wanted to see the Queen just once. To feel close to him again. The royal guards stood like statues. Their red uniforms were perfect. Their tall black hats didn't move even as rain poured down. One of them was different, though. His name was James. James had been a guard for 7 years. He knew the rules. Never break formation. Never speak. Never move unless ordered. These rules were sacred. They had been followed for centuries, but James noticed something. He saw Margaret stumble. Her legs gave out for just a second. She caught herself on the barrier. Her face went pale. No one else seemed to see. The crowd was too busy looking at their phones, trying to get the perfect photo. James felt his chest tighten. His mother was the same age as this woman. He thought of her standing in the rain like this, alone, struggling. The voice in his head was loud and clear. Help her. But another voice fought back. You'll lose everything. Your career, your honor. The entire world is watching. Before you hear what happens next, if you love true stories that touch your heart, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens when one choice changes everything. James made his decision. He stepped forward. The crowd gasped. Phones shot up. Cameras turned toward him. A royal guard had just broken rank. This never happened. Ever. James walked directly to Margaret. His boots splashed through puddles. His face stayed calm, but his heart raced. He could feel every eye on him. He could hear the whispers spreading like fire. He reached Margaret and leaned down slightly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" His voice was gentle but firm. Margaret looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, shocked. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Take my arm," James said. "Let me help you to somewhere dry." She hesitated. Then slowly, her trembling hand reached out. James guided her through the crowd. People moved aside. Some filmed. Some whispered. Some smiled. Behind him, James heard a sharp voice. His commanding officer. "Guard. Return to position immediately." James didn't look back. He kept walking. He brought Margaret to a covered area near the palace gates. A bench sat beneath a stone archway. He helped her sit down. "Thank you," Margaret whispered. Tears filled her eyes. "You didn't have to." "Yes, ma'am," James interrupted softly. "I did." Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. Footsteps, fast and angry. His commanding officer was coming. James turned. He straightened his back. He prepared himself for what was about to happen. But then, something else happened. A long black car rolled through the gates. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Queen had arrived. The car moved slowly. Its windows were tinted, but everyone knew who sat inside. The energy in the air changed instantly. The commanding officer stopped mid-stride. He snapped to attention. Every guard locked into place, except James. He stood beside Margaret under the archway, exposed, out of formation. His career was over, he knew it, but he didn't regret it. The black car came to a stop, not at the main entrance. It stopped right in front of where James stood. His heart hammered in his chest. This wasn't normal. The Queen never stopped here. The back door opened. A royal aide stepped out first. He looked directly at James. His face was unreadable. Then he turned and extended his hand back into the car. The Queen emerged. She was smaller than James expected. Her coat was elegant, deep blue with a silver brooch. Her expression was calm, as always. But her eyes moved quickly, taking everything in. The crowd went silent. Phones were raised, but no one spoke. Everyone held their breath. The Queen walked toward James. He felt his throat go dry. Should he salute? Should he kneel? He had broken protocol. He had no idea what to do now. So he simply stood still, his hands at his sides. The Queen stopped directly in front of him. She looked up at his face. Then she glanced at Margaret, still sitting on the bench. Margaret's mouth hung open. Her hands covered her heart. "What is your name, young man?" the Queen asked. Her voice was steady, not angry, but not warm either. "James, your Majesty," he answered. His voice almost cracked. "Guard James Whitfield." "And you left your post," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. "Yes, ma'am." James swallowed hard. "I did." The silence stretched. James could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel sweat on his back despite the cold rain. He waited for the words that would end everything. "Why?" the Queen asked. James looked at Margaret, then back at the Queen. "Because she needed help, your Majesty, and no one else was going to give it." The Queen's expression didn't change. She studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she turned to Margaret. "And what is your name, dear?" she asked. Her tones softened just slightly. Margaret tried to stand. Her legs shook. James reached out instinctively to steady her. The Queen noticed. She gave the smallest nod of approval. "Ma'am Margaret, your Majesty," the elderly woman stammered. "Margaret Brennan." "Brennan," the Queen repeated. She paused. Something flickered across her face. Recognition. "Is your father, Thomas Brennan?" Margaret's eyes went wide. Her breath caught. Yes, he was. "He drove for my mother during the war," the Queen said. "He was a good man. Very loyal. I remember him." Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks. She couldn't speak. She could only nod. The Queen turned back to James. The crowd was still frozen. Even the commanding officer hadn't moved. Everyone waited. "You broke a rule today," the Queen said to James. "A very old rule." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know why we have these rules?" "Yes, your Majesty." "For discipline. For tradition. For respect." Queen tilted her head slightly. "And do you believe you showed disrespect today?" James hesitated. This was the moment. His answer could seal his fate. He thought of Margaret. He thought of his mother. He thought of what really mattered. "No, ma'am," he said firmly. "I believe I showed respect, just not the kind written in a rule book." The commanding officer shifted his weight. His jaw was tight. James could feel the disapproval radiating from him. But the Queen raised one hand, a small gesture. It silenced everything. "There are rules that preserve order," the Queen said. "And then there are rules of the heart. Sometimes, young man, the second must outweigh the first." She turned to her aide. "Bring me a chair." The aide looked confused, but he obeyed immediately. Within seconds, a chair was brought from inside the gates. The Queen sat down right there, in the rain, next to Margaret. "Tell me about your father," the Queen said to Margaret. "I should like to hear about him." Margaret's face glowed. Through her tears, she began to talk. She spoke about her father's stories, about his pride in serving, about the medal he cherished. The Queen listened. She nodded. She smiled. James stood nearby, still at attention, but his heart was no longer racing. It was full. The crowd began to realize what they were witnessing. This wasn't just protocol. This was humanity. Phones captured every second, but this time, people weren't just watching. They were feeling 10 minutes passed. Then the Queen stood. She placed her hand gently on Margaret's shoulder. "Your father would be very proud of you," she said, "and I am grateful you came today." Then she turned to James once more. What she said next would change everything. The Queen looked at James. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. She had made decisions that shaped nations. Right now, she was deciding his future. Guard Whitfield, she said. Her voice carried across the silent courtyard. You will accompany Mrs. Brennan inside. See that she is given tea, and ensure she is warm and comfortable. James blinked. He wasn't being punished. He was being given an order, a direct order from the Queen herself. Yes, Your Majesty, he saluted crisply. The Queen turned to her aide. Arrange for a car to take Mrs. Brennan home when she is ready, and see that she is invited to the next garden party, Margaret gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Your Majesty, I couldn't possibly. You can, and you will. The Queen's tone was final but kind. Your father served my family. Now my family will serve you. With that, the Queen walked toward the palace entrance. Her guards fell into formation around her. But before she disappeared inside, she stopped. She looked back at James one more time. Compassion is not weakness, Guard Whitfield, she called out. Remember that. Then she was gone. The commanding officer approached James. His face was still stern, but something had shifted. You heard Her Majesty, he said. Escort Mrs. Brennan inside. James helped Margaret to her feet. She was crying openly now. Happy tears. Overwhelmed tears. He guided her through the palace gates. The crowd erupted in applause. The sound was deafening. Inside the palace, everything was different. The walls were tall and elegant. Paintings of kings and queens watched from every corner. Margaret's eyes darted everywhere. She couldn't believe where she was. A palace attendant led them to a small sitting room. It was warm. A fire crackled in the fireplace. The furniture was old and beautiful. Tea arrived on a silver tray. Real china cups. Delicate pastries. James helped Margaret into a chair. She was still shaking. But now it was from emotion, not cold. I can't believe this is happening, she whispered. I only wanted to see her, just once. And now? You've had tea in Buckingham Palace, James said with a small smile. Not many people can say that, Margaret laughed. It was a light, joyful sound. My husband would have loved this. He always said, I dreamed too big. Her smile faded slightly. I miss him. Tell me about him, James said. He sat down across from her. He wasn't in a hurry anymore. Margaret's eyes lit up. She talked about her late husband, about their life together, about their son in Australia who called every Sunday, about how lonely the house felt now, but also about the memories that kept her going. James listened. Really listened. The way he wished someone would listen to his own grandmother. The way he hoped someone would listen to his mother someday. An hour passed. Maybe more. Time felt different here. Slower. More meaningful. Eventually, a palisade returned. Mrs. Brennan, your car is ready whenever you are. Margaret stood slowly. She looked at James. Thank you. For everything. You didn't have to do what you did. Yes, I did, James said again. Some things are more important than rules. Margaret reached into her small purse. She pulled out a faded photograph. It showed a young man in a driver's uniform. He stood beside an old car. He was smiling. This is my father, she said. On his first day of service, he was so proud. She pressed the photo into James's hand. Keep it, as a reminder, that kindness matters, that people matter. James tried to give it back. I can't take this. It's yours. And now it's yours, Margaret said firmly. Please. James looked down at the photograph. At the young man with the bright eyes and hopeful smile. He nodded. I'll keep it safe. The aide escorted Margaret to the waiting car. James watched from the doorway as she was driven away. She waved through the window. He waved back. When he returned to the guardhouse, his fellow guards were waiting. Some looked angry. Some looked confused. One of them, a younger guard named Oliver, stepped forward. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, Oliver said, or the stupidest. James shrugged. Maybe both. Do you think you'll be punished? Oliver asked. I don't know, James admitted. But I'd do it again. The commanding officer entered the room. Everyone snapped to attention. He walked directly to James. His face was unreadable. "Guard Whitfield," he said. "Report to my office." Now, James's stomach dropped. Here it came. The punishment. The discharge. Everything he'd worked for, gone. He followed the commanding officer down a long hallway. The man's boots echoed on the stone floor. Neither of them spoke. They entered a small office. The commanding officer closed the door. He sat down behind his desk. He gestured for James to sit as well. James sat. He kept his back straight. He was ready for whatever came next. The commanding officer looked at him for a long moment. Then he did something James never expected. He smiled. "You know what the most important part of being a guard is?" the officer asked. James thought carefully. "Discipline, sir." "No." The officer shook his head. "It's judgment. Knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them. Most guards never learn that." "You did." Today, James didn't know what to say. "You're not being punished," the officer continued. "But you're also not off the hook. What you did today will follow you. Some will see you as a hero. Others will see you as a rule breaker. You need to be ready for both." "I understand, sir." The officer leaned back in his chair. "The Queen personally requested that you remain on active duty. She also requested something else." James's heart skipped. "Sir, you're being transferred," the officer said. Effective immediately, and James felt his world tilt. Transferred where? Why? Had he been wrong? Was this the punishment after all? The officer's smile widened just slightly. "You're being assigned to the Queen's personal security detail. She wants guards who think, who care, who see people, not just protocol." James couldn't breathe. The Queen's personal detail. It was the highest honor a guard could receive. "Report Monday morning," the officer said. "And Guard Whitfield?" "Yes, sir." "Don't let her down." James left the office in a daze. His mind was spinning. Everything had changed in a single day. One choice. One moment of compassion. And now his entire life was different. But as he walked back through the palace halls, he thought of Margaret. Of her smile, of her tears, of her father's photograph now tucked safely in his pocket. He had made the right choice. No matter what came next, he knew that. What he didn't know was that the story wasn't over. Not even close. Because 3 days later, something happened that no one saw coming. Asterisk. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. James stood outside the palace at 5 in the morning. His new uniform was pressed perfectly. His boots shined like mirrors, but his hands were sweating. The Queen's personal security detail. He still couldn't believe it. Other guards arrived. They were older, more experienced. They looked at James with curious eyes. Some nodded in greeting. Others said nothing. The head of security was a man named Commander Phillips. He was tall and broad-shouldered. His face looked like it had been carved from stone. He stood before the assembled guards and spoke in a low, commanding voice. "Some of you know why Guard Whitfield is here," Phillips said. "Some of you don't. It doesn't matter. He was personally selected by Her Majesty. That's all you need to know. Treat him like any other member of this team." The other guards nodded, but James could feel the weight of their judgment. He would have to prove himself. Every single day, the work was intense. James was assigned to interior palace security. He stood outside doors during private meetings. He accompanied the Queen during walks through the palace gardens. He learned her routines, her preferences, her quiet habits. She never spoke to him directly during those first days. She passed by him like he was furniture. But sometimes, just for a second, her eyes would meet his. And there was something there. Acknowledgement. Maybe even approval. 3 days into his new assignment. James was standing outside the Queen's private office. She was meeting with the Prime Minister. James could hear their muffled voices through the heavy door. He stood perfectly still, alert, ready. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. Guards weren't supposed to carry personal phones while on duty. But James had requested special permission. His mother had been sick. He needed to be reachable in case of emergency. He pulled out the phone carefully. It was his sister. She never called unless something was wrong. His heart dropped. He answered in a whisper. "What's wrong?" "It's Mom," his sister said. Her voice was shaking. "She collapsed this morning. They've taken her to hospital. James, it's serious. They're saying it might be her heart." The world tilted beneath James's feet. His mother, the woman who raised him, who supported every dream he ever had, who told him she was proud of him every single day. "I'm coming," James said. "I'll be there as soon as I can." He ended the call. His mind raced. He needed to request leave immediately. But protocol said he had to wait until his shift ended. He had to find Commander Phillips. He had to fill out paperwork, but his mother might not have time for paperwork. The door to the Queen's office opened. The Prime Minister stepped out. He nodded at James politely and walked away. The Queen appeared in the doorway. She looked at James, really looked at him. "Something is wrong," she said. It wasn't a question. James's training told him to say nothing, to remain composed, to wait for the proper channels, but his heart overrode his training. "My mother, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "She's in hospital. It's serious." The Queen's expression softened instantly. "Then why are you still standing here?" "I need to request leave through proper channels, ma'am. I can't just—" "Yes, you can." The Queen turned to her aide, who had appeared behind her. "Arrange for a car immediately, and clearguard Whitfield's schedule until further notice." "Your Majesty, I can't ask you to. You're not asking," the Queen interrupted gently. "I'm telling you, go to your mother. Family comes first. Always." James felt his throat tighten. "Thank you, ma'am." The Queen stepped closer. She placed her hand briefly on his arm. A gesture so rare, so personal, that James almost couldn't believe it was happening. "You showed compassion when it mattered," she said quietly. "Now let others show it to you. Go." 20 minutes later, James was in a palace car racing through London streets. The driver moved quickly but safely. James stared out the window. His mind was a storm of worry and fear. What if he was too late? What if he didn't get to say goodbye? The hospital was large and gray. James ran through the corridors. He found his sister in the waiting area. Her eyes were red from crying. She hugged him tightly. "She's stable," his sister whispered. "For now, they're running tests." James felt relief flood through him. But it was mixed with fear. Stable didn't mean safe. It didn't mean she was out of danger. A doctor came out. He explained that their mother had suffered a minor heart attack. She would need surgery. Soon. Maybe as early as tomorrow. The risks were significant given her age. James and his sister were allowed into her room. She lay in the hospital bed looking small and fragile. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped softly. But when she saw James, her face lit up. "There's my soldier," she said weakly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, Mom." James took her hand. It felt cold and thin. "I'm right here. Shouldn't have left your post," she scolded gently. "You have important work." "Nothing is more important than you," James said firmly. His mother smiled. "You sound like your father." He always said that too. James's father had died when James was 12. A car accident. Sudden and brutal. His mother had raised James and his sister alone. She worked 2 jobs. She never complained. She never stopped giving. "The Queen herself sent me," James said. "She ordered me to be here." His mother's eyes widened. "The Queen." "I'll tell you the whole story," James promised. "But first, you need to rest. You need to get strong for surgery." His mother squeezed his hand weakly. "I'm so proud of you, James. Every single day I'm proud." Tears burned James's eyes. He fought them back. He needed to be strong for her. The next 24 hours were the longest of James's life. He stayed at the hospital. His sister brought him food he couldn't eat, coffee he couldn't finish. They waited and worried. and prayed if they remembered how. The surgery happened the next morning. For hours. The surgeon came out looking tired but satisfied. It had gone well. She would recover. It would take time, but she would be okay. James felt like he could breathe again that evening. While his mother slept peacefully in recovery, James's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Guard Whitfield. This is Commander Phillips. Her Majesty has requested a personal update on your mother's condition. Please respond when able. James stared at the message. The Queen wanted to know. She actually cared enough to follow up. He typed back quickly. Surgery successful. Full recovery expected. Thank you for your concern, sir. Response came within seconds. Her Majesty is pleased to hear this. Take the time you need. Your physician will be waiting. She has also arranged for your mother's medical expenses to be covered as a gesture of gratitude for your service. James read the message 3 times. Then 4. He couldn't process it. The Queen was paying for his mother's medical care, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He showed his sister. She started crying again. But this time, they were tears of relief, of gratitude, of disbelief that something so good could come from something so scary. You really did something special, didn't you? His sister said. Helping that woman. It changed everything. James thought of Margaret, of her trembling hands, of her father's photograph still in his wallet, of the choice he made to break rank, to break the rules. I just did what felt right, he said. That's all anyone can do, his sister replied. James stayed with his mother for 5 more days. He watched her grow stronger. He listened to her stories. He laughed at her jokes. He remembered why he became a guard in the first place. To protect, to serve, to make a difference. When he finally returned to the palace, Commander Phillips met him at the gate. Welcome back, Whitfield. Her Majesty would like to see you. Immediately. Was something wrong? Had he taken too long? He followed Phillips through the palace halls. They stopped outside a familiar door. The Queen's private office. Phillips knocked twice. A voice called from inside. Enter. James stepped in. The Queen sat at her desk. Papers were spread before her. But when she saw James, she set down her pen and gave him her full attention. Your mother is well? She asked. Yes, Your Majesty. Thanks to you. Queen waved her hand dismissively. I simply ensured she received proper care. You would have done the same for anyone. She paused. That's precisely why I asked you here. James waited. His heart beat faster. I have a proposition for you, the Queen said. And what she offered next would change not just his life, but the lives of countless others. The Queen gestured to a chair. Please, sit. James sat. This was unusual. The Queen rarely invited guards to sit in her presence. He kept his posture straight, but tried to appear comfortable. It wasn't easy. I've been thinking, the Queen began, about what happened with Mrs. Brennan, about your choice that day, and about what it represents. James listened carefully. The royal family exists to serve the people, she continued. But sometimes we become so focused on ceremony and tradition that we forget the people themselves. We forget their faces, their struggles, their humanity. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, tourists gathered near the gates, taking photos, waving flags, hoping for a glimpse of royalty. I want to create something new, the Queen said. A program. An initiative that connects members of the royal household directly with people who need help. Not through charity, galas, or official visits, but through genuine, personal connection. James's pulse quickened. He began to understand where this was going. I want you to lead it, the Queen said, turning to face him. You would identify people who have fallen through the cracks. Elderly citizens like Mrs. Brennan, veterans, single parents. Anyone who has served this country quietly and now needs someone to notice them. Your Majesty, I'm just a guard, James said. I have no training in social work, or you have something more valuable, the Queen interrupted. You have eyes that see people, and a heart that responds. That cannot be taught. James felt overwhelmed, honored, terrified. This would be my only duty. You would remain on security detail part-time, the Queen explained. But the majority of your work would be this program. You would have a small budget, access to palace resources, and my full support. She paused. What do you say? James thought of Margaret, of her tears, of her joy at being seen. He thought of his mother in that hospital bed, of how alone she would have been without him. Say yes, James answered. Absolutely yes, the Queen smiled. It was rare to see her smile so openly. Good, you start next week. Commander Phillips will help you set everything up. Over the next month, James threw himself into the work. He created a system. People could nominate others who deserved recognition. Who needed help? Who had been forgotten? The nominations poured in hundreds, then thousands. Stories of elderly war veterans living alone. Single mothers working 3 jobs. Retired nurses who gave everything and now had nothing. James couldn't help them all, but he could help some. The first person he visited was an 87-year-old man named Arthur. Arthur had served in the Royal Navy for 30 years. He lived in a small apartment in East London. His pension barely covered his rent. He had no family. No visitors. James showed up at his door in civilian clothes. When Arthur answered, confusion crossed his face. Mr. Patterson? James said. My name is James. I'm here on behalf of Her Majesty. She wanted me to check on you, to see if there's anything you need. Arthur's eyes filled with tears. The Queen knows about me. She does now, James said gently. May I come in? They talked for 2 hours. Arthur showed James old photographs, medals he'd earned, letters he'd written to his late wife. By the end, James had arranged for Arthur to receive additional financial support. He'd also connected him with a local veterans group. Arthur would never be alone again. Word spread quickly. The press caught wind of the program. Headlines called it the Queen's Heart Initiative. People loved it. It reminded them why the monarchy mattered, why tradition could still serve the present. James visited 3 to 4 people every week. Each story was different, each person unique. But they all shared one thing. They had been invisible, and now they were seen. One afternoon, James received a call from Margaret. She had seen the news. She was crying with joy. You did this, she said. Because of what happened that day, you've changed so many lives. We both did, James corrected. You showed up that day. You stood in the rain. You mattered. Margaret laughed through her tears. I'm coming to the garden party next month. I already have my dress picked out. I'll be there, James promised. I'll make sure you have the best seat. The garden party arrived warm and sunny. Hundreds of guests walked through the palace gardens. Margaret was among them. She wore a lavender dress and a hat with flowers. She looked radiant. James spotted her near the rose garden. She was talking to another elderly woman. Both were laughing. When Margaret saw James, she waved excitedly. He walked over. You look wonderful, Mrs. Brennan. I feel wonderful, she said. Did you know? They planted a new rose in my father's honor? They just told me. It's right over there, she pointed to a small plaque. It read Thomas Brennan, Royal Driver, 1918, 1987, for service with dignity and grace. Margaret's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. He would have loved this. The Queen appeared on the lawn. Guests turned to watch her. She moved through the crowd slowly, greeting people, listening to their stories, being present. When she reached Margaret, she stopped. Mrs. Brennan, how lovely to see you again, Your Majesty. Margaret tried to curtsy, but her knees weren't cooperating. The Queen gently touched her arm. None of that. Today, we're simply 2 women enjoying a garden party. They talked for several minutes. James stood nearby, watching. This was what the world needed. Not grand gestures. Not speeches. Just 2 people connecting. Really connecting. As the afternoon faded, guests began to leave. Margaret hugged James tightly before she went. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Thank you, James replied. for reminding me what matters." As the garden emptied, Commander Phillips approached James. His usual stern expression was softer than normal. "You've done good work, Whitfield," Phillips said. "The Queen is very pleased." "So am I, thank you, sir." Phillips hesitated. Then he said something unexpected. "My father was a guard too. He always told me that rules exist to protect what's important, but sometimes we forget what's actually important." "You remembered. That day in the rain, you remembered." James nodded. He understood. That evening, James sat alone in his apartment. He pulled out the photograph Margaret had given him. Thomas Brennan, smiling, proud. Ready to serve, James had kept it safe. Just like he promised, he thought about everything that had happened. How one choice led to another. How helping one person created ripples that touched hundreds, maybe thousands. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Saw you on the news again? So proud. Love you." James smiled. He texted back, "Love you too, ma'am." He leaned back in his chair, tired but fulfilled. This was his life now. Not just standing at attention, not just following orders, but making a real difference. Outside his window, London hummed with life. Millions of people, each with their own story, their own struggles, their own invisible moments. James couldn't help them all, but he could help some, and sometimes that was enough. Sometimes one act of compassion could change everything. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would visit a 92-year-old woman who had been a nurse during the war. Next week, a retired firefighter who saved 17 lives and now lived alone. There was always someone else, someone waiting to be seen, and James would see them, because that's what he did now. That's who he was, not just a guard, but a bridge. Between the palace and the people, between tradition and compassion, between what was and what could be. And it all started with one choice. One rainy morning, one elderly woman who just needed help. James opened his eyes. He looked at the photograph one more time. Thomas Brennan's smile seemed to say, "Well done." "Well done," James whispered back. And somewhere across London, in a small house filled with memories, Margaret Brennan sat by her window. She held a cup of tea. She looked at the medal her father once wore, and she smiled because she had been seen. She had been valued. And in being valued, she had sparked something beautiful, something that would last long after the rain stopped falling, long after the crowds went home, long after the stories were told. A simple truth. That kindness matters, that people matter, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up. Pay attention and care. The rest takes care of itself. 6 months had passed since that rainy morning. The program James led had grown beyond anything he imagined. The Queen's Heart Initiative now had 5 full-time staff members. They had helped over 200 people, and the nominations kept coming. But today was different. Today, something special was happening. James stood in the palace's grand hall. It was decorated simply, but elegantly. Chairs were arranged in neat rows. A small stage stood at the front. Members of the press waited with cameras. This was a private ceremony, but the Queen wanted it documented. 20 people sat in the front rows. They were the first 20 individuals helped by the program. Arthur, the Navy veteran, was there. A former teacher named Helen, a retired postal worker named Samuel. Each had their own story. Each had been invisible until someone looked. Margaret sat in the center of the front row. She wore the same lavender dress from the garden party. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. She looked nervous but excited. The Queen entered from a side door. Everyone stood immediately. She moved to the front of the room with quiet grace. She gestured for everyone to sit. "Thank you all for coming," the Queen began. Her voice filled the space easily. "Today, we celebrate something very important. Not grand accomplishments. Not heroic deeds performed under spotlight. But the quiet dignity of ordinary people who have given their lives in service to others." She paused. Her eyes moved across the faces in the front row. "Each of you has served this nation," she continued, "in ways both seen and unseen. You drove buses. You taught children. You nursed the sick. You protected our streets. You asked for nothing in return, and for too long you received nothing." Heads nodded. Some eyes grew damp. "This program exists because of one moment," the Queen said. "One choice made by a young guard who saw a woman in need and decided that compassion mattered more than protocol." She turned to James. He stood off to the side, trying to remain invisible. But now, everyone was looking at him. "Guard Whitfield," the Queen said. "Please come here." James's heart hammered. He walked to the front. He stood beside the Queen, feeling completely out of place. "Your actions that day reminded me of something essential," the Queen told him. "That service is not about ceremony. It is about seeing people, really seeing them, and responding with humanity." She turned to her aide. He stepped forward, holding a velvet box. The Queen opened it carefully. Inside was a medal, silver with a blue ribbon. James had never seen one like it before. "This is the Royal Medal of Compassionate Service," the Queen explained. "It was created specifically for this program. You are the first to receive it, but you will not be the last." She pinned the medal to James's chest. Her movements were careful and practiced. When she finished, she stepped back. "Wear this with pride," she said, "not because of what you did for one person, but because of what you inspired for many." The room erupted in applause. James felt his face flush. He looked out at the people clapping. Arthur, Margaret, Helen, Samuel, all of them smiling. All of them here because someone finally noticed. The Queen then turned to the front row. "And now, each of you will receive a certificate of recognition. A small token, but one that says you matter. You are seen. And this nation is grateful." One by one, the 20 people came forward. The Queen shook each hand personally. She spoke briefly with each person, asked about their lives, listened to their answers. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't performing. She was genuinely present. When Margaret's turn came, she moved slowly. Her legs still weren't strong, but her spirit was. She stood before the Queen with tears streaming down her face. "Your Majesty," Margaret said softly, "my father spent his entire life hoping to matter, to be remembered. Because of you, he is. And so am I." The Queen took both of Margaret's hands in her own. "Your father mattered long before I remembered him, but I am glad I could acknowledge it, just as you matter. Never forget that."
Margaret nodded.
She couldn't speak anymore. The emotion was too strong. After the ceremony, there was tea. The guests mingled with palace staff. The press took photos. James found himself surrounded by people wanting to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him their stories. Arthur pulled him aside. "You changed my life, son. Before you came, I was just waiting to die. Now I have friends, purpose, a reason to wake up." His voice cracked. "Thank you. You deserve to be seen," James said simply. That's all. As the afternoon wore on, guests began to leave. James helped Margaret to her car. She moved slower than before, but her eyes were bright. "I wish my father could see this," she said as they walked. "Maybe he can," James replied. Margaret smiled. "Maybe he can." Before she got into the car, she hugged James one more time. "You're a good man, James Whitfield. Don't ever stop being exactly who you are." "I won't," he promised. He watched her car pull away. Then he stood alone in the courtyard. The sun was setting. The palace glowed golden in the fading light. James felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Commander Phillips. "You've done something remarkable," Phillips said. "You know that, right?" "I just helped some people," James replied. "No," Phillips shook his head. "You changed how we think about service, about duty, about what it means to protect and serve. That's bigger than helping. That's transformation." James didn't know what to say. So he said nothing. Philip squeezed his shoulder once, then walked away. James was alone again. He looked down at the medal on his chest. It caught the last rays of sunlight. He thought about everything that had happened, how unpredictable life was, how one moment could lead to 1,000 others. He pulled out his phone. He called his mother. "Hello, darling," she answered. She sounded strong now, healthy. "How did it go?" "It went perfectly," James said. "I wish you could have been there." "I was watching online," she said with a laugh. "The palace streamed it. I saw everything." "I'm so proud of you, James. So very proud. I love you, ma'am." "I love you too." James hung up. He took one last look at the palace. Then he headed home. Life continued. The program grew. More people were helped. More lives were changed. James visited care homes, community centers, forgotten neighborhoods. Everywhere he went, he looked for the invisible, for those who had been overlooked, and he found them again and again. He found them. 1 year after that rainy morning, James received a letter. It was handwritten on elegant paper. The return address was Buckingham Palace. He opened it carefully. "Dear James," it read, "you have served with distinction and heart. But more importantly, you have reminded us all what truly matters. Continue this work. Continue to see people. The world needs more of that. With deepest gratitude, Elizabeth R." James folded the letter carefully. He placed it in a drawer beside the photograph of Thomas Brennan. 2 pieces of history. 2 reminders of what service really meant. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle and steady. James watched it from his window. He thought of that morning, of Margaret struggling at the barrier, of the choice he made, of everything that followed. He had broken the rules. And in breaking them, he had discovered something more important, that humanity comes before protocol. That compassion trumps ceremony. That seeing one person, really seeing them, can change everything. The rain fell harder now. Somewhere in London, someone was struggling. Someone was alone. Someone needed help, and tomorrow, James would find them. He would see them. He would help, because that's what he did. That's who he was. A guard. A helper. A bridge between power and people, between tradition and heart. And it all started with one simple choice: to care, to act, to be human. The rest was history. But the work continued, every single day, one person at a time, because in the end, that's all any of us can do. See someone who needs help and choose to help them. Everything else follows from that. Everything good, everything meaningful, everything that matters. James smiled at the rain. Let it fall. Let the world be cold and difficult. He would be warm. He would be kind. He would be present. And somewhere, someone's life would be better because of it. That was enough. That would always be enough. The rain continued. The city hummed. And James Whitfield, royal guard and servant of the people, prepared for another day. Another chance. Another opportunity to make one person feel seen. One person at a time. One act of kindness at a time. One rainy morning at a time. That's how you change the world. Not with grand gestures, not with speeches or ceremonies, but with one choice. Made in a moment when it matters most, to break rank, to reach out, to help, and to never, ever stop seeing people. The end.